What's good, YouTube? So normally I don't talk about politics on this channel very often because this channel is about fitness, it's about health, it's about martial arts, and unless a political issue affects those things, it's not going to be something I'm very likely to cover on this channel. And I don't want this to be divisive or left versus right. If you're left wing and you like my channel, that's great. If you're right wing and you like my channel, that's great too. I don't want to be splitting up the fitness community based on stupid left or right issues which have nothing to do with the topics which I generally talk about on here. I don't want people to be discounting my opinion because they disagree with me on political matters which have nothing to do with what I normally talk about on here. But that being said, this is a video I thought had to be made just from speaking to certain younger family members, speaking to young activists online, and reflecting on my own behaviour when I was younger and taking into account what I've learnt during that time. So personally, I've been around a huge chunk of the political compass during my 30 years. So I've got a pretty good idea of what the values are of the different sides, what their fears are, what their philosophical positions are, and what some of the flaws are in their political ideologies. So this isn't meant to, again, separate people on left versus right issues and that kind of thing. This is stuff which all young political activists should be able to benefit from. And first off, there are some benefits to being young activists, most definitely. These days, you've got the internet, you've got a much better idea of how to use it than some of the older people out there, especially a lot of the older politicians. That can hugely be used to your benefit. You can gather information very, very quickly. It's a definite positive. You've also got a hell of a lot more energy when you're younger, you've got more free time, you've generally got a hell of a lot more passion, and those are all very, very good things. But, of course, you lack the experience, you haven't seen how the world's changed you haven't seen as much of the world change as some of the older people out there. You'll probably be lacking in large areas of knowledge, and you've probably, for most if not all of your life, followed the same political ideology. You've had very similar circles of friends. You haven't been exposed so much to the ideas of the other side. You may have heard what your other side has to say about the other side, but you're unlikely to have spent large amounts of time with different social circles who hold different political views and that kind of thing. And your views are very, very likely to change as you get older. So that's something to take into account. There's always a possibility that you're wrong. Never forget this. Another thing to remember is that your opposition is rarely just evil. Now, maybe they're misinformed, maybe they've made an error in reasoning, maybe they just hold different values for you. Maybe they value freedom over safety, or vice versa. Maybe where they view the balance is slightly different to you. That doesn't make them evil. Perhaps they're right. Perhaps they've actually perhaps they've got a philosophy which you haven't considered. So that's always worth bearing in mind. Your opposition is rarely just evil. Sometimes they are, but for the most part, the people holding those positions hold those positions because they genuinely believe they're right. And I forget this as well from time to time. I'm sure this is something which nearly everybody does. But you should get more aware of this as you get older. So, given all of that, it's always worth remembering that, given that debate is a good thing. If you actually engage with those people and discuss ideas, perhaps you'll end up changing their minds. Perhaps they'll end up changing your minds. But open debate and discussion is a very, very good thing. Shouting over your opposition, trying to silence them, it's not going to. You may win the argument, you may get them to shut up, but you're unlikely to have got them to change their mind. They're probably going to think, well, this guy's a fucking idiot, and just not talk to you. You haven't changed their mind. You're unlikely to have changed the minds of anyone listening. Anyone listening is probably more likely to side with the person being silenced than the person hysterically shouting at them. So please bear this in mind. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this to some degree. If you've got a protest, you've got to show some level of conviction to your beliefs. You've got your banners and your slogans and your chants and all of that shit. They have to show that you actually have a very strong opinion on the matter. But when you start engaging with other people, people who may be on the fence, then be reasonable and rational, because if you start shouting over them for simply sharing an opposing viewpoint, you are not going to change their minds. You're just going to be pissing them off and making them more sure that your side is a bunch of fucking idiots. Also, something which you need to take into account, and I'm sure everybody already knows this, but it's something which you become increasingly aware of as you get older, but that is that the real world is very, very complicated and messy. A single statistic very rarely tells the whole story, and statistics can often be used to back up virtually any position you want to prove. Now, this isn't to say that statistics are worthless, far from it, but using them correctly takes much more than a conclusion based off of a 2-minute surface level evaluation. So, look at how those statistics were gathered. What was the sample size? Who was the sample taken from? What methodology was used to actually get those statistics? Are there statistics which contradict those? Could there be different conclusions as to what those statistics actually mean? These are all very, very important questions. So just parroting some statistic which you've heard doesn't tell you very much about reality taken by itself. Another thing as to how the real world is often very complicated and messy. Understand that legislation, no matter how well intentioned, often has very unintended consequences. So perhaps it could be extremely expensive. There isn't an infinite amount of money in the world. This money's been taken from taxpayers who've got no choice in the matter. So could that money be spent better? Could that money be spent better in other ways to achieve the same result or more important results? Could the legislation be used to target people it wasn't intended to target? And is there a possibility that the legislation could actually backfire and make the situation you're trying to solve even worse? So these are all things you need to become aware of if you're a young activist. And finally, please put yourself first from time to time. Now, self-sacrifice, it can be a very noble act, and it is something which is worth doing from time to time, but you can't help anybody if you run yourself into the ground. You can't help anybody if you fail in university because you spend 12 hours a day with activism online, or you lose your job, or anything like that. So please, from time to time, put yourself first. So, in short, your opposition is rarely just evil. There's a chance you can be wrong. Engage in open debate. Remember, the world is often a very complicated and messy place. And finally, put yourself first from time to time, because you can't help anybody if you run yourself into the ground. So, thanks for watching. Comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.